Hey, Mabelle.
Hey, Tori.
Hey, Playwrights. Welcome to Hey, Playwright,
a podcast about playwriting and life.
Hey, Mabelle.
Hey, Tori.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Tori.
We are so excited to have you on the show. This is Brain James Polak from the Subext podcast, who is also an accomplished playwright. And this is such a great opportunity for us to connect with a sister podcast, one we admire and listen to. And so thank you so much for coming on the show to have.
Or is it a brother podcast?
Oh,
why?
Yeah.
Maybe my podcast is not gendered.
A sibling podcast.
A sibling podcast.
There we go.
This is weird though, y'all, because we're doing something unusual. We're recording this with video. Like, we're actually planning to show people the video, so I have to be mindful that this whole conversation will be on camera, and we're not used to that. Normally we're like,
we can see each other when we do our podcasting, because we use Squadcast, but of course the audience never sees. So we can see the person that we're talking to, but it's just the audio.
Which is wonderful, because when we make these reactions like, Brian, I can't believe you just said that. Like, people can see that. So it's cool. So anyways, welcome, Brian. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I got these plants just for this occasion.
Oh my gosh, they're beautiful.
Now I feel really bad. I can see the shadow. Oh, I can't. There's no shadow. There's no shadow puppets, but you can't. This is really a sad background, everybody.
We really did not plan properly for this, because I'm in the process of moving. So I have like half a bookshelf and junk. You have nothing, and Brian really was the only one that was prepared for this. So
I know, with the lovely
plants. I brought in a lighting designer, and I got plants. I staged this whole thing.
It's amazing.
Well, we appreciate that you're putting forth the effort. So thank you. And
I'm a professional.
We disrespected your presence here.
We are not. We're the rookies.
What are you doing today, Tori?
Today, we are going to be talking about Brian's play, Here Rests the Heart, which is an incredible play with so many twists and turns, jumps back and forth through time and space, and has ghost characters, which I love.
Tori has a thing with ghosts, for ghosts. So, you should tell us if there's like anything that you don't want us to talk about, where you're like, don't spoil that.
Oh, that's true.
No, spoil away. I don't really believe in spoilers.
Okay, good. All right.
The ghosts are in the cast list, so I was thinking maybe that's not off, that I could mention that.
No. No.
So we're going to be talking about that, and I'm sure some other bits of Brian's journey are going to come into the conversation. But first and foremost, Brian, could you tell us where this idea for this play came from?
Yeah, this play has been in my mind for years now. Back in 2012, I was, off camera, we were talking about, somebody that shares my last name. And back in 2012, while I was in grad school, I, along with other classmates of mine, was brought to Poland. And the Polish side of my family has always been a mystery to me. Much like the protagonist in the play, as we talk, you will see a lot of parallels between myself and that character. So in 2012, I visited Warsaw, Poland. Never thought in my life I would be traveling to Poland. And I had this unbelievable experience. Like, it was really, it hit me emotionally in a way that I didn't expect. First, it was funny. I arrived and I checked into the hotel, And the person at the front desk at this hotel looked at my passport, saw my last name, and laughed. And he said, "You know your last name means Polish person, right?" And I said, "Yes, I've heard that before." And he said, "Your name is Brian Polish person." And I said, "Thank you. Thank you very much." And that was my introduction. That was like my first interaction with somebody in Poland. But what happened was, um, I was traveling around the city. We were doing different things. We were attending a theater festival and talking to talking to Polish playwrights. But as I was moving about the city, like on public transportation or walking on the streets, I started to see people that just felt unbelievably familiar to me. Like I'm only 25% Polish, from my grandfather on my father's side, but that whole side of my family is essentially a mystery to me. Um, my parents divorced when I was young, and I hadn't seen my father since I was, I think, like 10 years old or so. So, and at this point, I'm in my late 30s. So, but I'm on public transportation, and what I see, what was striking to me was my grandfather's face was every face that I saw. I just remembered this stern, like etched in concrete face that would never smile and looked very scary. And the memory of him is at an upward angle because I knew him as a young person. So it's just like looking up at my grandfather, and I just remember this stoic face. And that face I saw all over Warsaw. And I felt Polish for the first time in my life. And I'd always been identified as Polish because my last name is Polak. Um, but I never understood it or thought about it. And now here I am in the country, in the capital city, and feeling emotionally connected. And so I go about the rest of the week or so that we're there. And at the end of our um, trip, we had like a big round table conversation with a bunch of the Polish folks that had brought us over there. And this was at maybe the American consulate, but like people from the American embassy were around this table, and everybody went around all of the American playwrights from USC who was on this trip. We each spoke about what we learned on our journey, and I was like third or fourth to go, and I was just thinking about, I'm going to talk about how I just felt familiar for the first time, like felt this connection to my family. And when they were like, "Okay, Brian, what thoughts do you have?" And everybody else was like, "Oh, it's been such a nice trip, and we saw some great theater and wonderful productions." And they get to me, and I just start crying around this table with all of these like dignitaries and my fellow playwrights from grad school. I just start crying, and I mentioned to you before we hit record that. I'm an easy cry, but I am not I have Polish resting face. Like I'm not one to show my emotions publicly, and it was completely like out of my control. And it took me 30 seconds or so to like compose myself and then explain myself, and then just talk about the experience I was having because I was experiencing it in real time. So that was my first trip to Poland, and what I had the great fortune of being invited back 2 more times. Like basically every 2 years, the same person that brought that first group of my cohort from USC over kept inviting me back, and I think partially because of my Polishness, and I think partially because of my sincerity in that first experience, I think touched her, and so I was brought back to work on a project and to meet other playwrights from Poland, and then I was brought back a third time. But and this is the thing that really triggered the play. That first experience that I talked about kind of is like a little bit of planting seeds. But a few months before, I was invited for the third time. So this is now in 2016. I got a Facebook message from somebody that said, are you the Brian Polak, grandson of Frank Polak of Nashua, New Hampshire? And I said, yes, I am. That's my grandfather, and the grandfather I was just talking about. And she said, my name is Magda. I'm a distant cousin of yours. I live in Poland. I've been doing genealogy research. And I found your name in his obituary because my grandfather had died, I don't know, like a year, maybe a couple years earlier. I can't remember. I don't remember what year he died. But she was doing her genealogy research and was trying to find everybody in the family and create a family tree. And so we were exchanging Facebook messages, and she said, it'd be great to meet you one day. And I said, I'd love to meet you and hear more about this research. And she's like, okay, one day. And then maybe 2 months later, I got an invitation to come back to Poland. And so I message Magda and I say, guess who's coming to Poland? And so on this third trip, I got to see her. I got to meet my cousin, and we met at an Irish pub. She brought her computer, and she showed me all this research she'd been doing, and it was illuminating because this side of my family is a mystery to me, and so I learned a lot about my family, and I learned about my great grandfather, coming to the U.S. from Poland, and I learned a little bit about Polish history, and it was kind of amazing. So what I forgot to mention was on there was a sort of like a progression. First trip, I had that emotional experience. The second trip, I toured Auschwitz. And on the third trip, I met my cousin. And as I was flying back to the US from that third trip, I started to put these things together. And I decided December of 2016, I'm going to write a play about this. I didn't know what this meant. At first, the first idea was it was going to kind of be like a love story between cousins, but not like a romantic love story, like a familial love story between two cousins. And that was sort of where I was starting. So I knew like the cousin was going to be a central character. And I just kept it in my head for, I guess, like 3 years. And then I started putting pen to paper and figuring out what this play was going to be. And this is absolutely the hardest play I've ever written in my life, because I tend to play in manageable narratives that move forward linearly. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And I tend, like, everything I write is personal. This was the most personal, most, I think, openly, directly connected to me. And I think that made it hard as well, because I didn't want it to be a biographical play. How we playwrights are always putting ourselves in our characters, in our circumstances, and I do that in every single play. But this time it was like really hitting home, and it's just been, it's a 3-act play. It's like 140 pages long, and it's just been really, really hard to do. And it's part of the reason I wanted to talk about it with you both, is because I'm still working on it. I just finished, I finished a draft of it a couple years ago, but or a year and a half ago, but not like it wasn't any good. Like I knew it wasn't good. Like it was at the point where it needed to be. It was, it's a process. It was the first step in that process, and I think it's getting to the point where I'm comfortable with it. I won't call it done. It's certainly not done, but I'm getting comfortable with where it is. Um, so anyway, I have no idea what the question was that you asked, but this is a stopping point as far
Yep.
as like explaining the origin of the play.
That was the question. Like you totally explained it, and having read the play, like what you just shared provides like tremendous context for I can see it, and I can see why this would be a challenging play for you to write. I have a follow-up question to what you shared. Before your first trip to Poland, did you identify with any other cultural background, or?
I didn't identify.
Okay.
I was just like, American boy.
Mhm.
That's really it. Like and it was something I thought about a lot, particularly being in grad school and having the great Luis Alfaro being one of my primary professors. And like, I don't know how he saw the relationship, but I saw him as a mentor. And he so identifies culturally as Chicano, and he's so connected to his roots and his history, and he writes about them so beautifully. And I met him in 2010, a year before I went to grad school. But when I met him, I was working at a theater in Pasadena that was producing Oedipus El Rey, and that's how I met him. So I saw his work and met him at the same time, and that's when I started to. I was very early in my own playwriting at that point, but that's when I started to think about who am I, like what's my identity? How do I identify? How do I identify as a person, as a human being? And it really started with my first identity was as a person from New Hampshire, because what does that mean? And I don't know what that means. So I've had this question. My first question that was sort of driving me was, what does it mean to be from New Hampshire? So that's sort of like the part of my identity that I first explored.
Wow. I can imagine that provides even further context of why it was such a powerful moment, that moment in front of all of these people that were you just,
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you had that moment. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Tori.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, so then the character of Freddie, would you say that out of all the characters in this play, maybe Freddie is sharing some of your journey as Brian the playwright?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Freddie is total. Total is not the right word, but Freddie is a work of fiction. But Freddie is the first character that I've written that is very close to who I am. Our emotions about things are very, very close.
And he's a pianist, right? Are you trained in music? I know I was reading your bio on your website that it seems like your background was in sports. Is that right? As you were growing up?
Yeah. I was a really mediocre athlete growing up. Like the older I got, basically the worse I was as an athlete. So when I was like a freshman in high school, I was on the football team, and I was pretty good, and I was like doing stuff, and I was making stuff happen. My sophomore year, same kind of thing. And then I got older, and I played less. By the time I was a senior in high school, I like barely played at all. And in that same time period, this addresses your question about the music. It starts to address the question. You'll learn that I have a very roundabout way of answering every question. But my close friends, my last couple of years of high school, were musicians, and they could all play, and they were starting bands and stuff like that. And so at 17, 18 years old, I had friends that were like, "Hey, Brian, you should take up bass or drums or something." And my friends were already really good, and I already felt so far behind that I said, "No, it's too late." I'm 17 years old, and I'm like, "It's too late to start now."
No.
What an idiot! Such an idiot. So I've grown into having this sort of like deep appreciation of music and musicians, creative process, musical expression, and it is a motif that returns in play after play of mine. Almost every play has a central musical instrument, and some of my plays have songs in them. And I don't know how to write songs, but I write like poetic expressions that in multiple plays I've had people who know how to write songs sort of like write the music to accompany these little songlets that I've written.
Yeah,
So I wish I had any musical ability, but I do not.
No, but it's an interesting choice, right? To bring Chopin in, and okay, spoiler alert, is one of the ghosts who shares the same first name, Frederic.
The character being a pianist and the connection that they have with Chopin is kind of, for me, I mean, I didn't want to write about a playwright, but I wanted to write about somebody trying to be an artist in a time of turmoil. And so I made, and because I leveraged music so much, it became a piano, and Chopin became the obvious choice because Chopin was a pianist in a time of turmoil for Poland. So that's all that happened.
Wow. I was curious about that, but also I felt like it did beautifully fit into the story. But I thought, oh, how did all of those pieces come together? Because Mabelle and I were talking about being curious if you outline, like, are you a plotter?
Yeah.
Or a pantser?
I have a.
Do you make an outline? Like, because there's a lot here, and it's So how did that work for you?
So I have a tendency, and my tendency is to have an idea for a play and to live with it for 9 months. I'll think of something in the spring that I'll want to write in the winter. And this playwright group I used to be part of in Los Angeles had a new play month every February, where you'd write something that never existed from soup to nuts in the month of February. And so I always, even though I'm not part of that group, I still think of February as the month I write a new play. So sometime around spring, I'll start to think of like, what do I want to write next February? I have a list of maybe 100 or more ideas that I will like scroll through on my phone. I'm on the notepad on my phone. And if I don't have something that's already eating at me, I will look through that list and go until something captures me, or if nothing does, I will just keep thinking until I find something. And so I just live with it, and I live with the characters, the primary relationships, the primary conflicts, and I will start to, in quiet times in my days, when I'm falling asleep, when I'm driving, when I'm taking a shower, I'm thinking through the story, and I will be writing myself notes on my phone in that whole 9-month period. If it's a play I'm working on that requires any kind of research, then as the year progresses, I get into the fall, I'll start like reading some books or watching documentaries, and I'll be formulating a sort of like structure in my head. So what I end up doing is my first day of writing, say I'm going to write a new play for the month of February. February 1, the first day is I essentially write, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And I just go through, and it's not a outline format. It's really like essentially a list of scenes that encompasses the central plot and story of the play, and that's where I start writing. I'll start the very first line. So maybe later that day, on the first day of writing, if that quasi outline comes to me quickly, I will then just start writing, and I will write linearly. That's not been the case for every single play. There have been a couple plays where I've written the ending first, because it was just like the most evocative, moment. I had to get it on paper. But when I started to write this play, I knew it was going to be 3 acts. I knew Act 2 was going to take place in Auschwitz. I did not have any idea what Act 3 was going to be. So I had the sort of like bones of Act 1 where, there are protests happening. The protests move across the world from Poland to Chicago. And then we start to meet the central characters. And I knew that Act 1 would end on the protagonist visiting Poland and touring Auschwitz. And then Act 2 would then flash back to 1944. I really did not know what Act 3 was going to be, and I lumbered through Act 1 because it's one of those plays that is Acts 1 and 3 are not really particularly grounded in they move very fluidly, and it was sort of like one scene just bleeds into another scene kind of thing, and it was hard to get through that, like that first act. But then I got to Act 2, and Act 2 is like a straight narrative unit set play that's like 30 pages long, and I wrote that in like a day. Like I just knew I didn't have it completely blocked out. I just felt like I knew what was going to happen, and I made there's this moment at the end of Act 2 where there's a Nazi guard who's sitting at the piano. Like the whole interaction between the Nazi guard and the person playing piano in Act 2, at the end of Act 2, or trying to play piano.
Right.
I didn't know that scene, and when I was writing Act 2, I got chills because I was like, I know this moment that's going to happen, and I don't write tension particularly well, but that moment, I knew as I was writing it, I was like, this is the best example of tension that I could write, and it just came together. Like Act 2 is like Act 2 is a one act that stands on its own. It could stand on its own, and I've been told by people that that's what they want the play to be, is just a World War II Auschwitz play, and that's just not. That's not what the play is to me. Like the play is doing something more than simply exploring this one place in time. But yeah, so Act 3, when I did not have it outlined at all, I didn't really know what to do. What I knew was I took inspiration from Angels in America. Angels in America was a humongous inspiration for this play because it gave me I gave myself the freedom to just do whatever with the narrative that just felt right. It didn't have to be traditional in any sort of like approach to playwriting. That it can be emotionally truthful and feel right to me as the writer, and that's sort of what I held on to as my anchor. Like Angels in America goes in some wild places and very unexpected places, and I was like, I'm going to give myself the freedom to play with the tone. The tone can go in a lot of different directions and doesn't need to be one thing. Like it doesn't need to be dramatic or comedic. It can be whatever the moment calls for. And so that's really how I found Act 3 was sort of like through that inspiration of what Tony Kushner does with Angels in America. Yeah.
You were talking about the scenes in the bar in Auschwitz. Did you make any discoveries when you were in Poland that led to the crafting of that part of the story?
That entire story comes from the tour I took at Auschwitz, and for anybody who's been there knows that there are like two main camps. There's like the camp that is sort of turned into a museum where some of the old brick barracks you walk into and you see these sort of museum displays, and then there's the second part, which is the camp as we know it, where it's just like this vastness of little houses where everybody was forced to stay. And on my tour, at the end of the first part, you basically finish in the first gas chamber that they built. It was like the experiment, and it was in the first part of the tour ends there. But in my memory, as we were walking to that, we were walking around a part of these structures on the sort of outer edge of the camp, and the tour guide pointed out a building where there was like, and I can't remember what the term was that she used. There was like a cafe. It was like a cafe or a bar or something like that. And she points it out, and I was sort of stunned for a moment because I realized, oh yeah, they live here and they work here. These monsters have a day job of doing this, and then there's time where they relax. And I was like, holy shit, what does that look like? And then so that her pointing this out stuck with me, and I noted it. I wrote it down, and I honestly have struggled to find evidence of it. Like, I've researched this. I found somebody recently who was a former tour guide at the death camp, and this was like literally 2 days ago. Because I'm still in it, and I still like, this is such an important part. It's so important to not fabricate stories of the Holocaust, that I need to get it right. And so I'm like dedicated to finding evidence of this, and just like making sure that I'm not relying on poor memory. But I'm certain I heard this mentioned by the tour guide, and so that's where that whole thing came from. And that Act 2 really demonstrates this. What I'm trying to do with Act 2 is demonstrate the multiple ways in which the Polish people dealt with or were dealt with during World War II. So there were Poles who were put into the camp and murdered. There were Polish Jews and Polish Catholics and, homosexuals, people with disabilities, and they were, rounded up and put into camps. There were Poles who fought, in the resistance, and there were Poles that secretly, helped Jews escape and helped Jews survive during the time. And then there were Poles who were collaborators, and they made this choice as maybe they believed in, what the Nazis were doing, or maybe they were doing as a way of survival. I don't know, but there were like, this is all of the different ways in which the Polish people were impacted during the war. And Poland right now is dealing with something that we're dealing with here, which is an erasure of history. Right now we have so many people who were saying we can't teach slavery, and critical race theory is taboo, and all these books are being pulled from libraries and all that, and it's amazing to see this happen when just a couple years ago, essentially this was happening in Poland, and it was brought up in our news cycles as an example of a government, taking too much control over the people and the history and trying to rewrite history books. So that was a big part of why I wrote Act Two the way I did, and why there are Polish people who are working in this cafe serving Nazi guards drinks and whatnot.
You mentioned your connection to Freddie, right? How it's a deeply personal connection, but Tori and I both felt very deeply connected to Freddie as well, because the questions that he's asking of himself, or the questions that we have asked of ourselves as playwrights. So when you were talking about that, I feel like we had that conversation earlier this week, or a few days ago, before we had even read your play. And I think this is just something that we constantly ask ourselves. Why are we doing this? What for? Does it matter?
Yeah. It's something I've been thinking about really my entire life, going back to high school, where I just started to get really moderately politically engaged, and it was really because I had a couple. I grew up in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is one of those states where it gets a lot of political attention every 4 years during a presidential cycle, and I had when I was a senior in high school, I turned 18 my senior year of high school. No, I turned 18 my senior year of high school. So I was thinking very much about I get to vote and what that means, and what are my beliefs, and how do I see my politics in the world. But I had friends who were more engaged than I was, and I kind of, followed them. And I have been wishy-washy with my political engagement for my entire life. And when 2016 happened, that crushing moment where I started to, because I took my third trip to Poland. I don't know. I think I left 3 weeks after the 2016 election, and it was like still carrying the weight of it. And I arrive in another country, one of only 2 Americans amongst like 20 something playwrights from all over Central and Eastern Europe, and I felt like I had to represent my country, and so I'm talking to people from Lithuania and Ukraine and Poland and Czech Republic and Bulgaria and Romania, and started to hear about the politics of their countries and how active they are politically, and I saw so many political rallies in Poland where the artists were like the center, the driving force of these. And I come home thinking about this in this new context of this new world that we're living in post 2016 election. And, it changed me. I haven't become I went to a protest in Chicago, and that was the first time I had ever attended a protest. So I sort of started to get that understanding of the importance of using your voice and being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I felt and I'm sure this might have been what we're talking about, Mabelle, about being an artist can sometimes feel very selfish. Like we're doing our work for ourselves, and it's like we put ourselves out into the world and we're like, love me, right? But what about the world itself? What are we doing? There's that misattributed quote to Winston Churchill about, art is what makes the world worth living, or something like that. I don't know who really said that, but I think that's what I was holding on to. That was sort of like my ballast for a very long time, that I'm an artist and I make the world worth living, and that's how I contribute. And so what Freddie is doing in the play is very much what I'm thinking about as an artist, and it's changed the way I've thought about my day job, like my survival work. I left Los Angeles because I loved living in Los Angeles. I was there for about 10 years, but I just was not interested in film and television. I'm seeking something that's closer to community, and that's sort of my journey ever since leaving LA. And I might not be a person that leads protests, but how can I contribute? And over the years since I've left LA, I've gotten closer and closer to finding the best way for me to contribute to community. And right now, it's as a grant writer for this nonprofit I work for, and that's the closest I've been to see like a direct result of my work impacting young people, for example, which is the focus of this organization I work for. And so that's sort of like my kind of like Freddie not vicariously, but Freddie in partnership with their friend Cade is like getting into it more directly than I am, but he's doing it for the same reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing.
I always do think of theater as bringing people together to, to inspire, to educate, I just love learning something new. I never would have thought about that story of
Chopin's
art.
Oh.
Yeah. And also it made me think, what your play also did for me, Brian, was made me think about my own family history and how little I know. And so I can really appreciate how you really put this research and time, and oh my God, took 3 trips to Poland, and you were making these discoveries all along the way. And I think that's incredible.
Have you had a chance to hear the play out loud? Have you had a reading of it?
Yeah, so I had one reading of it, kind of early-ish in COVID lockdown time period. So it was like an earlier draft. It was very, very raw. And I assembled, I had a play. I had another play that was, on hold because of the pandemic in Chicago, and we had rehearsed it over Zoom for a while when the lockdown first started. And so I had like a lot of actors that I knew, and I just was hungry to do work. So I was like, let's do a reading of this. It's such an unwieldy play for me. I needed to hear it. And I think in like non-pandemic time, at that stage of the play, I might have still convened a reading of sorts. But I really wanted something to do. That was sort of like for the first year of the first year of this thing. I was inventing projects for myself to do. And so I had a reading, and for anybody who has listened to the most recent episode of the Subtext, where I interview Harun Ali, in the opening to this episode, I talk about this play. I don't name it. I don't think I name it, but I talk about this play. And I had, in that reading, I had essentially at the end folks tell me, Act Two is your play.
Mhm.
Act two is great. Act two is tight. Act two is your play. And my wife basically said the same thing too when she read it. She was like, "I love Act Two," and I was like, oh, "Thank you." It's 3 acts long. There's 110 other pages that I've slaved over, but so that was the response. It was basically, I mean, I got some like specific feedback, but the big note coming out of it was, I want a whole play of Act Two, and I got it. Like I completely understand, because a rough draft, like any rough draft of a play, is sometimes a challenge. You know, sometimes you attend readings or you've written a play yourself, and you know it's kind of rough, but it's process. Like, we have to go through this process. We have to run through the gauntlet. We have to have the bad pages read and listen to the challenging feedback. And that's kind of how I interpreted it. I was like, you know what? I get it. I see that this is a powerful moment in the play, and it's really moving people, particularly when you're coming out of a 70-page Act One that is just all over the place, and you're just like, I'm here now, I'm over here, and what's happening? Like, what's the point? What's the driving force of this story? And then suddenly you're like locked in this bar for 30 minutes, and it's a tense drama. The tone does not change. There isn't a lot of humor in it. It is like, it's tight and tense. So when I was hearing that feedback, I was like, I get it. I don't like what I'm hearing, but I understand it. And I just, all the work I've been doing ever since then is to make Act Two part of a 3-act play, and make Act One and Three need it, and make Act Two better by making the acts that sandwich it work better.
It was, I would love to see it. You know, Mabelle and I, we
Yep.
drove over boys, so let us know.
Yeah, you're going to Seattle, right?
Yes. Oh my
Yes, we are so excited.
We're really excited.
Yeah, that's gonna be.
You should check if you
Yeah, Brian, come and join us.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Seriously, come and join us in Seattle. But
come and join us.
But at the very least, like, check out Christian St. Croix. I don't know if you know his work, but that play is, I explain it to people, and
Yeah,
so,
it's beautiful.
We're not gonna talk about Christian because we're here to talk about Brian's play. And so I think what Tori was leading towards is when we're gonna speak when this play is mounted, we will be there to go check it out.
Yes.
Well, it sounds unwieldy, but it is not. It is not a play that requires a lot of stuff, and it only takes 8 actors, and that was really important to me, that I didn't, because I have another play that's a 3-act sort of like homage / response to Our Town, and I can't cut the characters below 12. Like, I've gone through it, and it's made it challenging, like, to get a life for that play, because the cast size is so large. So I was like, I'm writing another long ass 3-act play. I can't do the same thing with the number of actors. There will be no more than 8 actors to get this done. But when I wrote it, I didn't write it counting. I just wrote it. And I was like this when I got done, and then tried to figure out what was what. And I was like, oh, good.
Gosh,
okay, yeah.
Smart. I think smart on your part. Otherwise, you would have been so in your head, you know, more than we are as playwrights to begin with. So it's good that you stayed out of your own way. That's good.
Well, I think it's important to like give your and this was really an exercise for me in freedom with my writing, and not give myself too many boundaries. Like, just let myself write whatever I was inspired to write. I never would have written, like, I don't know how long that monologue is that Chopin delivers that opens Act 3, but I would never in a million years write this comedic monologue for Frederick Chopin if I wasn't giving myself like total freedom to just write whatever I'm inspired to write. And I'm just so glad I did that. I hope I kind of carry that through to future works.
Yeah. I mean, it's the one place where we can really try things out is in our writing. We for now we can freely write about what we want about to write.
Oh, shush, Tori, don't say that.
No.
Forever.
Okay, you can cut that. We don't want to put that negativity out there.
Well, it's funny you say that because on my last trip I took to Poland in 2016, I was amongst all these playwrights from these Eastern and Central European countries that I mentioned, and we were sitting around. We were supposed to be devising a short piece of theater for this sort of like conference we were in. So together we all had to sort of like create something to then present to the others. And I was sitting there listening to them, and we were talking about Belarus and Belarus free theater. And I don't know if you know anything about what's happening in Belarus, but there's a massive crackdown on, it's basically a fascist country now. And there's a crackdown on art and theater, and Belarus free theater has had to go underground, and they're not allowed to do what they do. And I left that trip, and I was like, I want to write about what does it look like? What do theater artists do at a time when what they do and who they are is not allowed anymore? And so I sat on that for a couple of years, and it took me 4 years to write my response to that question that I had. Like, what does it look like? And so what you're talking about that you want to cut out of this is something I think about so much, because I believe in like what I put into the play I wrote about it. I believe that we are going to do what we do no matter what the world tells us. If we are creators, we're going to create, and we're going to find our nooks and crannies and our cracks to be able to make that happen.
Yes, you are correct. I believe that too. I believe that too. Oh,
To bastardize a quote from one of the greatest movies of all time, Jurassic Park. They'll find a way.
Right. Yes.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. So wait, this actually leads nicely into a asking for a friend, Brian.
Yes.
And actually we have two asking for a friend. So I'm going to give the first one, and it dovetails off of your synopsis of this play. In your synopsis, you say that this is a play about the value of family and friendships and finding your voice in a time of turmoil. Here rests the heart, challenges us to find our voices and account for what matters most in the world, and calls us to take action with what precious little time we get to live. So, Brian, what matters to you most in the world?
Yeah, I think authentically being there with people and for people. And I think the way I explain it is, I think every day we're confronted, I mean, most of the time this is in a non-pandemic world, but every day we're confronted with choices. You can go this way or you can go that way. And sometimes these are choices of you can do something or you cannot do something. And sometimes that is somebody dropped a wallet in front of you. Mm-hmm. And you can do something or you cannot do something. And so the way I try to live my life is by making choice to be good whenever I'm confronted with that option. And I'm not perfect. There are moments where I didn't make that right choice that I still think about. There was a moment at an airport a couple of years ago where a woman was struggling to put her big bag into her trunk, and I walked right by, and I'm like, I walked right by because it was a Mercedes Benz, and I said, somebody with a Mercedes doesn't need help. That's what went through my head, and I walked by, and I started to like feel so bad about myself after that, and that was like 4 years ago, and I still think about that I could have made a better choice there. But that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, and that's what sort of, I don't know, that's my North Star. I don't know, some metaphor.
I think the fact that you still think about that moment, though, just shows that you do have a good heart, and she got her bag in there. So I think
she might still be there.
She made it happen.
She'll still be there.
Go back and check, Brian.
Fourth trip to Poland, you'll find out.
This was at Logan Airport in Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh my goodness.
I'll never forget.
But this leads into the next question, asking for a friend. Where would you rest your heart? And who would you ask to do it?
I was talking to my wife recently about how I don't like to impose on anybody. I want to conceive my own death in a way that is not going to bother anybody or create any work for anyone. Like, I kind of want to create essentially like a Rube Goldberg machine that will bury me and do all the work without having anybody to like have to pay for anything or do anything or lift me. Like, I feel so bad, like in death, someone's gonna have to like lift me and move me and take care of my body. So this idea of what to happen with my heart, I don't know. I think I'd like it to be donated if it works still. I know that sounds like, I'm a holier than thou response, but I don't know. We were talking off mic about not wanting to negatively impact nature by killing bugs, and I kind of feel that way. Like I want to Rube Goldberg my body into the ground, but I also want everybody to harvest every part of me that could be useful. So I mean, but where my heart lives everywhere I've lived. My heart is so in Keene, New Hampshire, where I grew up. My heart's in Boston, where I lived. My heart's in Washington, D.C., where I went to college. My heart's in L.A., where I spent many years. My heart's in Chicago. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin right now. And my heart is living here because I feel so, through my job, I'm so connected to this community. So maybe if there's a low impact way for people that won't be very expensive, that they could just like ship me around the country, and who knows where I might end up after this. I could live in San Diego, and in my will, I will make it your responsibility to take care of me.
Oh my gosh. The co-host of Hey Playwright.
Circa 2021.
We just did that one interview.
Barely know you.
Yeah, Tori, geez, I feel like I was up for it. I was like, we'll make you proud, Brian. We'll make you proud.
No, I totally would do that, Brian. If you ask me, I take responsibility very seriously. I would totally do. I would.
She does. I believe she would.
I totally would.
Even though she might say afterwards she'll do it, but she'll be like, just that one interview.
I know.
Grumble, grumble, grumble.
Okay, hand me the heart. Oh my goodness. So Brian, do you want to segue us, Mabelle? Do you want me to?
Oh, well, I don't know. So now we're at the organically we've made our way to the writing exercise portion. Have you thought of something? Or are you like, I'm cool? Like,
I gave this exercise to a young writer recently who was just exploring their voice and exploring what it means to write character. So the writing exercise that I gave them, I'll give now, and that is to write a fictional monologue in the voice of somebody close to you.
I'm gonna do one on Mabelle.
oh my God.
I'm just kidding. Oh, I love that though. I mean, right away the wheel started turning about the possibilities. That's a great one, Brian.
That is a great one. I'd do my mom and it would get me in trouble.
Yeah, but don't you think a lot of the times the people closest to us don't recognize themselves, right, in our stories, or do they?
You know what my trouble has been writing my family is that they're not talkers. Like my family, like we don't sit around the table and share story. We're not storytellers. We're not talkers. We're not expressors of emotion. This is why, like, I talk about how I know so little about my family history. It's because my family has been these buttoned up New Englanders who keep shit to themselves. So it's been really hard to write anybody in my family directly in any of my work because there isn't, like, I can't identify. I think about it all the time. Like there is like a very autobiographical piece I want to write, but I'm like, how do you write characters who don't talk? You know, it's something I think about all the time.
Oh, that's where you get to just really imagine, right?
Yeah. And then you end up with Dorothy in my play.
Sounds like a dream, having a family that doesn't talk. Mine's the opposite.
Mine doesn't talk
kidding.
because they just quit talking to each other. Yeah, there was too much talking and then there was none. So, you know, I talk to those that matter the most to me.
Which is
it's a short list. Yes. Yes. This has just been lovely. I've enjoyed this so much. I feel, Brian, like I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah, it feels very it feels very weird and comfortable, and like hopefully, like, you know, I think Tori and I obviously were used to hanging out, but it's really I feel like, yeah, you're like her cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
And, you know, cousin Brian.
And maybe a lot of that has to do with your podcast because you know, we get to hear you talking to other playwrights, and you know, we get to hear your rhythm, your cadence. You know, we get to learn about you, and so I just felt like I know. Wait, is that the stalker thing we were trying to avoid?
Yeah, we're trying to make that. But you know what I was thinking? I was like, it's not BTK. Is BTK the serial killer?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the boy band? BKS?
Is it the Korean band?
Yeah, BTS.
Yeah.
So not the serial killer, but the Korean pop, right? K-pop band.
Yeah.
So like people do crazy stuff in the name of BTS, right? And they did it for the Beatles, and they've done it for like. So I don't know. I'm gonna say no. But I will say, Brian, your podcast, I've cried.
Yeah,
I've had there's people whoever is only living in the Hey Playwright bubble, which is like, I don't think my mom's heard your podcast, so I'm gonna just like your interviews are just they're so good, they're so deep, I bravo to you and just in telling those stories and I love it. I'm such a fan of.
Thank you.
So
I cry too sometimes while
do you
asking questions.
Do you?
Well, it's happened like 3 times. I've started tearing up. Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun. Hopefully it was okay for you, but we had a blast. And thank you for letting us read your script. Like, we truly value that and feel honored that you would trust us with your work in progress. So thank you so much for that.
You know, it's like, you both know that one of the things that we want as artists is just to be seen. So the fact that you invited me to do this and agreed to read a very long play of mine and talk about it, like, I feel very seen. And as somebody that is creating a podcast myself and trying to have other people be seen, it feels nice to be on the other side of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It was 140 pages of wow. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.